Have you ever wondered what it takes to put a yarn festival together? What goes on behind the scenes? Well, my guest today is going to tell us all about it. Hi, welcome to Fiberchats. My name is Irina. I'm the host here, and I have Felicia Eve today with me. Hi.
Hi.
Welcome to Fiberchats.
Thank you.
So this year was my first time going to Woolen Folk and Rhinebeck, and I had the best time, I must tell you. It was like such a beautiful event. It was really nicely organized. The amount of vendors was like amazing, and the variety of things was amazing. So I was wondering if you would share how it's all starts.
How the magic happens, huh?
Yes.
So this was our second year putting on Woolen Folk, and 2021 was kind of the comeback year for everybody because we were still very much in COVID. Canada was still closed. The UK was still closed. So people couldn't come to Rhinebeck from other countries. And so it was really, a national thing. Like people who were coming from outside of New York State were just decided they were going to do it, kind of throw caution to the wind. And myself and the other organizer, the other co-founder of the event, Catherine Clark of Brooklyn General, we had been kind of planning this event in our mind for a few years. We wanted a different type of an event that not just people coming to shop would enjoy, but vendors would enjoy as well. Both of us owning yarn shops ourselves, mine is Strengthening Studio, hers is Brooklyn General. We have a different perspective on what it is to vend. Like when we decide to vend outside of our stores, we have to make a decision of how much of our store are we going to bring with us to a remote location. So, which is not easy because our stores were still open during that time. So we wanted something where the vendors would have the opportunity to shop and to meet and mingle with each other. And a lot of events don't afford that opportunity for them. So we were very mindful of that. And the actual venue was important too, something that was accessible and pretty and someplace you'd want to actually sit and just enjoy the time and not just kind of run through and go to the next thing. So we kind of found the venue first a few years beforehand, and it had been changing managerial hands over and like 2 or 3 times in our process of trying to plan it. We had like 2 or 3 different people who were our contact persons. So that was just a little bit frustrating, but we were diligent and stuck with it. And like I say, last year was kind of like we planned it all within 2-3 months. And we had 500 people that came, and we had about between 20 and 25 vendors, if you count us and people who we had visiting in our booths. And people enjoyed it. Like we advertised on social media. We weren't as active last year as we were this year on it, but we still had 500 people show up, and it felt like the perfect re-entry event for in-person events for that particular time of year, right? And people were just like, when are you going to do it again? So we were crazy and said, yes, we were going to do it again. But with a little bit more experience under our belts, we were able to approach it very differently and had a full year to really kind of focus. So we had a third person who was diligent about staying on top of us, say that they wanted to help us with social media and things like that, because we do own 2 different businesses. So it was basically 3 businesses we were running at the same time, 4 if you count social media, right? So this person was very diligent and said that they would run our social media for us. They would keep track of all the posts and things of that, which was a huge, huge help. And it alleviated us from having to do it other than reposting it on our own or, liking. We responded as the organizers to any questions or anything that came through on DMs and not the person who was running the social media for us, which was also important because we really wanted to be our voice and not someone else's voice that was responding. So we started almost in January, last of this year, little before planning it, like, a website, the ticketing, how we were going to go about the ticketing. And then we started to put together a vendor application, after our list of jobs, what we felt were important. It was vendors, it was food truck people, it was sponsorship. And it was just ultimately when we had gotten to the point where we had sold 1,500 tickets, we knew we needed to have a production team because that wasn't something. I mean, last year we literally were putting the tents up ourselves. This year we knew we were not going to be able to do that. So we went from 500 guests last year to probably almost 3,000 people that attended this year. And we went from about 25 vendors last year to over 65 vendors this year. And that doesn't include their staff that came with them. It doesn't really include our staff, our booths that we had from each of our own stores. And it doesn't include food vendors that we had also there participating as well. So, and sponsors, we had more sponsors this year than we had last year too. And basically it comes down to a lot of relationship building. Like a lot of the vendors from the previous year was like, we loved it, we want to come back.
Right.
But then it was a lot of new vendors that we may not have necessarily known, that we were vetting initially, like, yeah, this might be a good fit or this wouldn't be a good fit. But it was really important to us that everybody be available to be able to come. Like we created an emerging BIPOC fund so that BIPOC vendors would be able to come and participate, because the costs for our booths were not inexpensive. It was about $750 we charged, but that could be a lot for a small business to be able to come up with just to get the booth before you talk about supplies or getting there or staffing it or anything else. So we created a fund where vendors who were coming could contribute to that to be able to supplement the cost of that for BIPOC vendors. And we had a few that took advantage of it, not a lot, because there are other options Rhinebeck Weekend for people to be able to go that are far less expensive than ours. They don't have the number of people coming through that we have, but you make choices for your business that work for you, right? So we created these different ones and it worked. Like people were.
Was it difficult for you to decide which vendors you're gonna pick? Like, was there overflow?
After a while, it wasn't. We eventually did cut it off just because we wanted to keep everybody concentrated under the larger pavilion. We didn't want to have to decide who was going to have to go to another space in the venue, because then how do you decide that, right? So we capped it. Well, at least we thought we capped it and we thought we had shut it off, but then we had probably another 10 people still sign up after that. We didn't tell them no, we just put them in there. We had one vendor that actually came in a trailer, so they didn't actually need a space under the pavilion. They could be just outside the pavilion. So and then there was it's 65 people who said, yes, I want to have a space, but that doesn't include the number of vendors who invited other vendors to come and vend with them. I would say probably half of them did. So really closer to 90 vendors, if you think about it, right?
Decide like on what kind of merchandise they're going to be selling. Like, how did you create that? Because it was a wonderful mix. There were
it was a self-selection, to be honest. Like, I feel like people were very diligent about who was already there, because we were advertising. Like, we were advertising the whole time. Every time we would get vendors or people who we knew were going to be participating, we were putting them up on social media. So eventually when new vendors would come along, they would say, there was an application they had to fill out, right? Saying, this is our website, this is where we sell, this is how long we've been in business, and this is kind of like our wares. And I know specifically, and I didn't clear each of them. It was a couple of us that were vetting the applications, but a number of them said, I want to come. I also sell project bags and pins, so maybe not put me near here. So there wasn't just one vendor selling one thing. There are multiple vendors selling multiple different, copies of other things, but everybody's an artist, so it all looks different, right? So we just were able to what we were intentional about was spacing, like where we placed them in the venue, and a little less specific about who we let come and who didn't come. It just, at some point, it just became what the cutoff was. This is the cutoff, and we're just not going to take any more vendors, and let's just spread everybody out to be able to do what they want. Because even though it's all bags, they're different bags, so they're not the exact same thing. Like you say, it was a huge selection. Like, it was difficult for you to want something and it not be there. You not be able to find it at Wool & Folk. Like, it was really there. So,
well, I also found that in comparison to Rhinebeck, it was, because it's smaller venue, right? It's cozier. It's like more manageable, because you can walk like leisurely through the whole thing, and you can see everybody's wares. It just felt like more manageable.
Yeah, no, we were very diligent about not creating timed entries. So we started at 12 o'clock and went through 7, and you could be there the whole time, or you could come there for part of the time. We were not in the business of trying to compete with other businesses at other shows that were happening on that Friday, who were timed entry events. So if you had a 10 to 11, then you could get to us before 12 o'clock and be there from the beginning, right? But if you had something later in the afternoon, you could come right at 12, leave and come back. And we were fine with that. But if you came and stayed, which a lot of people, we have gotten a lot of feedback saying, we loved it so much. We don't really feel like we need to do Rhinebeck. Like we felt like everything we needed was there. We could shop, then we could enjoy the music. We can enjoy the podcast patio. We could sit and eat and take a breath and knit a little bit and then get back up and go shop some more and really get to see all the people. And the vendors were incredibly happy. They all had very lucrative days. They had a very lucrative day and they were very, very happy with the outcome of the event.
Well, when you talk about competition, right, there were like a bunch of other events outside of Rhinebeck happening, and obviously Rhinebeck itself, like
Yes.
the New York Woolen Ship. When you were first thinking about putting that festival together, how did you plan to differentiate yourself from other competing festivals there?
Well, again, we had been to all the festivals. We had been to all the different versions of the other things. And while they were great, they were exhausting. And they just didn't feel like we're all shopping for yarn and we're all shopping for fiber stuff, but it just didn't feel like it built any kind of community. And we were very interested and very intentional about creating spaces where communities, where groups of people could get together and spend time, not just kind of run past each other because you're running to something else. It gave you space and time to be able to connect, which a lot of the events don't do that.
Right. So you also had the podcaster patio, which like I found amazing because I met all my friends there and it was like really nice idea. How did you decide on who you're inviting there?
Well, I will say the person who we had hired to help us do all our social media, the podcast patio was one of her initial ideas. And we were like, oh, that sounds cool, but how do you pick? Like, I love podcasts. I don't watch all of them who could watch all of them, right? Like I have friends, I follow them on social media, but I'm not a sit down and let's watch a podcast kind of person. But there are a lot of people who are. And so she made suggestions to us and we just reached out to people and see who said yes. And we were very fortunate that we had 5, we reached out to 6. Initially, 6 all said yes. And then 1 dropped out, which we weren't really sure why, but 1 dropped out. And then we thought somebody else was going to join, but then they ended up not being well, so they didn't join. We didn't even get to announce them that they were going to join, which would have been a really big deal with this particular person. I won't say their name, but they ended up not being able to come. But the 5 groups that we had were phenomenal. Like they were very excited. They were very appreciative of even being asked. They're thinking I'm just doing this for me and my 10 friends that are watching me on my podcast, when it was not the case. Like the Grocery Girls are phenomenal. They're hilarious. They have their own following. Gigi loves it. Gigi made it, again, huge following, and they're friends. And then ultimately, if you were there at the actual live podcast patio, Adela Colvin from Lola Bignarco actually joined the Grocery Girls and Gigi during their session. So it was a whole other thing. The dynamic was absolutely phenomenal and people really got into it. They were throwing yarn out like they were at a basketball game. Like it was hilarious, right? But we picked people who we thought resonated with us, and we just wanted to we wanted to create another aspect, another experience, right? Like it really comes down to the experience. That one of the biggest sayings, or a saying that people will say, like, you could forget what people said to you, or, but you always remember how people made you feel, right? And we wanted people to feel like they weren't being rushed, that they were important. We want to show you all the things. We want to make sure we had all the things that we as human beings would have liked to have seen at a festival and hadn't seen necessarily, right? So, and then to be able to create these events within the event, right? For people to be able to kind of go and have these separate types of experiences was a gamble, and it worked. It worked for us. It worked really well. And we're already thinking about who we would invite next year to be on the podcast patio.
Well, you mentioned also that like you learned from the mistakes of the first year and you changed things around for this year. Were there any mistakes that you can think of that you need to
for this year? Yes,
next year.
definitely. Like the check-in process was a lot, because we had sold 2,500 tickets before we even opened the gates. And then we had people that were showing up at the day of buying tickets, right? And so everybody, because we've been trained as fiber people, you got to show up early, you got to stand in line because you're going to miss out. They all showed up early. They stood in line because they thought they were going to miss out, but there was nothing to miss out on because everything was there, right? So the check-in process was a little prickly. We could have used more volunteers, and we thought we had more than enough that we needed. And even the venue, I would say, wasn't really prepared. Like, even though it's a large venue and they have like Field and Supply, which is another really large event, but they have a large event over the course of 2 to 3 days. We had a large event all in one day. So they, staff people were standing around going, saying, we've never seen this place fill up the way that it did, as fast as it did, So I think it was a little bit overwhelming for everybody. I know I was everywhere. Like, I was at the check-in booth. I was at my own booth. I was at the merch booth. And then I hosted all the podcast patios and, did an introduction and meeting and greeting people. People want to be in proximity to you, which is another thing. Like, we each have our own worlds and communities that we've built in our own rights. And then we created this new thing. So, along with that comes a responsibility, a celebrity, if you would say, that can be a little overwhelming, right? So, but it's a blessing. Like, I consider it to be a blessing. I try to do what I can, say hi to people that I can. I get on social media and say, if I looked right at you and didn't say anything, blame it on my head and not my heart. Like, I had 10 million things that were going on. But I'm so incredibly thankful for the number of people who came, the number of people and there were some people who were not happy. The parking was definitely a situation that we have to deal with. Because the space only has so many places that you can park. There is an overflow lot, but it wasn't as close as we were made to believe that it was. We had asked, should we have a shuttle to bring people over? And they were, oh no, it's not a big deal. But it literally biblically rained the day before. Right. And so there was a huge, the pathway from the lot to the venue was a muddy mess, right? And we didn't think about it because we didn't have to walk it. Like, I stayed on the venue and so did Catherine. But we were coming from the cabins right there directly we were practically in the venue where we stayed. So we didn't have to visually deal with it. And in the midst of the day, it was probably 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And we'd been there before we even heard anything about there was an issue with the parking, or even the security people out front, not letting people get dropped off. That's not us. That was not us. That wasn't something, an instruction that we gave. That was a liberty that they took on their own. Because we were like, why would you not allow them to drop off people with handicaps and then go park someplace else? Like, that would have been a gracious thing to do, and totally something that would have been not even a thought. Like, of course, yes, do that. But they upset people, which in turn made people upset with us. Like, they're not upset with the cop. They're upset with us. Like, it was a decision we made and it wasn't. So those type of nuancy things. But when you look at the list of things that, wrong to right, we did more right than we did wrong. And the things that were wrong are fairly easily fixed. So we're excited to tweak those and, move on to the next thing.
Well, I mean, is it frustrating because you put so much effort, you work for a year, right, preparing it, thinking all these details. I'm sure like you're losing sleep over it, and like it's a lot of work for 3 people, or even including all the
Yes.
volunteers, right? And then people come and start complaining. Like, sometimes I know from myself, like from my own experience, right? Like, I can have 100 very positive comments on some video, and then one person is gonna
that negative one you remember though. Yeah, exactly.
And it's gonna be like, oh my God, like, did I do that? Like,
right.
better, right? Like, how do you stop yourself from taking it personally?
It is, what I realize is that it is very personal for that person. Like, they genuinely are upset. They have a problem with it and they want to be heard and seen. Is one of the reasons why you can ask all the vendors, you can ask the podcast patios, you can ask the sponsors. I was intentional about, just amongst us, that we remember that there's a person on the other side of that email that you're sending to, that we all have flaws, we all have things going on. I would hold Zooms like this, like I would informational Zooms, so we could have each other, and we would never have all 65, but we would send the copy of the video so that people could listen to the questions other people asked. And if they had some, they could send them to us. But for me, the biggest thing is that it is so important for us to look at each other's faces and realize that we're human beings. We're not robots. We're not working for someone else. We all work for ourselves, and we're just collectively, right, trying to do something nice. So start there before you get so angry and so mad with people and feel like you, Felicia, did this to me, Jane Doe, Jane Doe. Like, it's not that. And anybody that watches my social media or has talked to me or has met me or has been to my event knows that that is not our energy at all, right? That is could not be further from the truth. But again, there are some people who have their issues and concerns. It can feel very personal. I personally know, just not even just from the fiber industry, but just other, other careers I've had. I have a medical background. I've done development. You need to learn how to take a no, and you need to learn how to be able to deal with people who are going to be irate and just not get irate yourself. So some of that, I've used that preparation to be able to deal with things like this. And the reality is you're never going to please everybody. Somebody's always going to find something wrong. So just deal with that. And just, if you understand that, you could be like, okay, this is the one person. Like if you got 20 people that are like, this is phenomenal, I'm coming back, and I'm everywhere you have it. Like, I can't tell you the number of vendors who are like, we don't care where you have it, how you have it, like what day it is, sign us up for the next, as long as you have it, sign us up. Like, we're there. We don't care, because this was such a great experience. But you'll have one that be like, you know what? It rained on my tent, and this was an awful event, and the smoke was up and whatever, and I'll never come back again. And I'm like, I'm so sorry. Like, I genuinely am sorry that you had that experience, and we hope that you change your mind, but we understand whatever your decision is. I'm not going to beg you to stay. Like, I'm not going to beg you to come back or try to change your mind. Like, because if I feel like if you have carried whatever that was from whatever was happening then to your computer and sat down and typed whatever that is, or carried it to a phone and picked up the phone and made that phone call, you're passionate about it. You need a minute to be able to figure it out. I don't have to be a part of that process. That's a personal thing. So I don't take it personally. I'm not looking for perfection. I try to do the best that I can and keep it moving.
Well, one of the dear friend of mine is selling in like some small shows, right? She's selling her, whatever she needs, her handmade item. And she told me the story that she registered for this show near her house, and they promised her 10 by 10 booth. And then when she got there, she got like 6 by 6 in some dark corner right next to the bathrooms. And she was like very upset about it.
Yes.
How do you decide like who is going to be located where? Like, is that part of the price of the package, or like, is it difficult to figure it out?
Everybody pays the same price unless you pay for double or multiple booths, right? So the way we started the process was, and we had eventually, like I said, we hired a production company who was very good, had used that venue before and knew what the best layout was, and helped us with the tents and how to split them up and things like that in situations where there was more than one person per tent. So we paid money for that, for experts who know what they're doing. But for us, we went through and placed people where we thought it made sense. We took the larger booths. So like, I had a multiple booth, she had a multiple booth. There were multiple people who paid for 2-3 booths. They're kind of like the anchor stores in a mall. Like, you put them in different spaces, and then you put a selection of people around them that is complementary, which is all fiber, right? But you like have people who have, they may not have yarn, but they have, consignment things, or like vintage items that they may have found or something like that. And they were there not far from a booth. There were 2 directly across from our booth. Sometimes it's friend groups, not for nothing. Like, like Spin Cycle is always going to be with Mad Pot, so you kind of put them in close proximity to each other if they aren't already selling yarn together. So it really comes down to space, like what the vendor's requirements are, like what's their setup. Do they have a lot of walls? Do they have a lot of grid walls? Do they have a lot of stuff on the floor? Like, what's our pathway that we have people walking? Like, what's our pattern, our traffic flow going to be? And that's how we kind of laid it out. And we sent it to people ahead of time. If they had problems with where it was, we were happy to change it ahead of time. We gave people load-in time so that everybody wasn't showing up at once, so that we can deal with whatever on the spot emergencies needed to happen. And the teams were amazing, like absolutely incredible, who were there on the spot to help with that. But we didn't have anybody irate, and our thing was, tell us ahead of time and we can try to figure it out. Don't show up the day of late and then want to make changes to the whole layout, because that's a no. Like, that's a quick and easy no. So it comes down to just being considerate and planning. Like, we are planning. You paid us money, and we did what we said we were going to do with respect to what you paid us and what we offered. I think we over provided. We promised X, and we overgave, because people are like, this was great. Like, we appreciate the thoughtful things. Like, we were very much diligent about, like, you need to eat, vendors. So we give them lunch. Like, we include lunch in their fee. So like, we give them a ticket, or if they purchased it from the vendors, then we reimburse them, or we tell the vendors, please take note of these people's food. They'll come with the badge, and we'll know. And then we pay the vendors on them, because we felt like that's important for them to be able to be nourished and well fed. And, rested for a bit. Like we allow them to bring not just themselves, but one or two other people included in their fee, free of charge, to be able to relieve them so they can go to the bathroom, or if it gets really busy, you know, things like that. Very considerate things that unfortunately don't happen in all trade shows like that.
Right. I have a sort of controversial question.
Okay.
So Rhinebeck charged, I think, $12. Some other festivals charged like $15. Your entry fee was on a higher end. Was that a concern for you? Like, were you concerned that you charging way more than all the other venues in the area?
No, and I'll tell you why. Last year we charged $55 per ticket, and we had 500 people come and pay $55. Nobody really brought it to me directly, because some of it, like vendors, there were some vendors who were asking questions like, oh, well, what are you charging? We feel like that might be a lot. My position was, that's not really their place. You know, like if you can pay your vendor fee and we provide this great venue for you to be able to host these people, they should just be excited that we actually have customers who are willing to pay $55 to come in and then shop at their booth, right? So the reality is those other places can charge $12 and $15 because of the venue. Like, we don't own Hutton Brickyards. Like, they own the space where they are, you know, or they found a space that was less expensive, maybe less room, less amenities and things like that. We didn't charge as much this year. We did lower the price. We had early bird tickets at $35. If you were mindful, July 1st, you could buy 35 tickets. You could buy $35 tickets, and 1,500 people did. Like July 1st through the 15th, almost 1,500 people bought $35 tickets, which was smart, you know, because then after that, the tickets were still only $45, still $10 less than they were last year. But we had, you know, 1,000, another almost 1,500 people pay the $45. So I don't think it's cost prohibitive. I, as a yarn shop owner, see what people spend on yarn. We all know individually what we spend on yarn. Yarn is a very expensive sport, as far as I'm concerned. I put it equivalent to like golf or tennis. You know, like it is a sport, because we travel to buy yarn. We go to festivals to buy yarn. You know, we do all of these things. And I mean, we travel to New York. We travel to Edinburgh. We travel to all these different spaces. We will go to multiple events in a weekend, all to buy yarn. So it may have felt controversial at first, and people were like, oh, this was just expensive. But like I said, the experience within the experience, you paid $45. Yes, you could shop all you want. You got to buy great food. You still have to buy food at all those other places. So that wasn't anything different than you would have normally did. The podcast patio, we could have charged extra money for that. We didn't. The music, the live music, we have bands that come and perform and things like that. We could charge an extra fee for that. We don't. So we're covering our costs. And we felt that the $55 last year and the $45 and $35 we charged this year, you can see where your money went when you came to the event.
Are you afraid that like next year you'll have to start turning people down? Like if the event is gonna keep gaining
so big? We might. We're investigating. As much as we love Hutton Brickyards, and I can't imagine having it someplace else. You have to imagine having it someplace else if it still wants to get bigger, right? We could never go to Dutchess County Fairgrounds, because that's Dutchess County Fairgrounds. Like, that's their thing. But there's a uniqueness, you know, to our event, and there's a coziness, you know, an intimacy about our event that we want to maintain. So I don't know that we would cut people off. Is it a possibility that could be multiple days? Maybe, you know, so that we can allow as many people to come as want to come. Maybe. I won't say that hasn't been something that I've thought about, because it has. But we don't want it to feel like Rhinebeck, you know, like we don't want it to be dusty, and, you know, like Rhinebeck is Rhinebeck, and it serves its purpose and it has its things. We were not trying to be Rhinebeck. You know, we wanted to be something different, and we feel like we did that.
Well, when you started, it was just the two of you, right? Then you felt like you need the third person. Do you feel like you'll need the whole like team working on this for this year?
The third person actually approached us about helping us out because they really enjoyed the event and they had an expertise that they thought we could use and we appreciated it. And so I always think that we will need some sort of a manager to do that type of stuff, to do that social media type stuff. We may hire someone else in the coming year that can help us with other aspects of it. But like I said, the production team that we had actually managed a great deal of those things. Like they manage our vendors, who we already had relationships with. We had used them before, but I didn't have to talk to them about the number of tents because I had somebody else worrying about the number of tents and the size and where they were going to be and when they were going to pick up. I didn't have to worry about that. I could just worry about hosting, like, and being there to see the people and make sure that the vendors have what they want and our guests, because we consider you guys to be guests. You're not just, clients that show up, you're our guests. So it freed us up to be able to really host the event in a way that felt like you were coming to my yarn shop or to my home.
Tell me about the volunteers. Like, who are those people? How many you used and how was that?
So it was so funny because initially we were like, we need 100 volunteers. And the production team was like, no, you don't need that many volunteers. You probably need 20. We said, you sure? They were like, yeah, you only need 20. So I pulled like 10 or 15 people that I knew. Catherine did the same. Of course, people back out. And so we probably ended up somewhere between 10 and 15. It wasn't enough. It was not enough. We could have used 50, if not more. The production team was great, and their team definitely popped up where we needed them to be, but because they didn't necessarily have an understanding of the fiber world, there were some things that they just didn't grasp, that they didn't get. And so I think also that was challenging for us individually, was that we, in addition to being the host of the entire event, we each had our own booths. And even though we had staff within those booths to work them for us, those staff people, sometimes we had to shift them depending on where else we needed somebody to be. And so the volunteers, we tried to be, so many people were like, put a call out on Instagram, but like I have 16,000 followers on my Instagram. Catherine has 20 some on hers. Like, can you imagine the number of people you have to fill just for volunteers? Like, we didn't want to do that. We wanted to ask our people who come to our regulars at our yarn store. Like I have a loyalty program. Like, so I asked those people who are members of my loyalty program, do you want to come and volunteer? Most of them had already bought their tickets by the time we offered, but our offer was, if you want to come and volunteer, of course, your admission is free. This is where you're going to be. You got an apron so people could identify you and stuff like that. But overwhelmingly, my volunteers were like, we're here because we believe in you. We believe in this event. We'll pay for our tickets because we support it. We'll need more. If it's going to stay at the size that it was last year, potentially grow, we'll need far more volunteers. And there will be a vetting process.
Did you get anything to eat the whole day?
I did. I did. I had two of my besties who, are my knitting buddies, who were with me last year. They were with me again this year. They were very diligent about, you need food. There are a few people who were like, we're going to check on you because you just keep going the whole time. And I did eat. I ate breakfast that morning and I had something during the day.
Well, you know how like when you host Thanksgiving dinner or something, and
you're the last person, if at all, to eat. Yes.
And then the guests leave and your head is just like constantly thinking about everything that happened.
Yes.
You don't even remember half of the things. It's all a blur, but you just know that you're happy. How was that? Like, how did you feel after 7 o'clock, everything closed, everybody?
I was exhausted, but like still riding a high. Like I still ride a high from the fact that it was just a really good event. Like I felt good about it. Like I felt like we accomplished our mission. I felt like people were happy because people literally came up to me like, thank you. Like, this was great. Like this was really good. So I was hungry. I had my people who were in my booth and a couple other volunteers who were there to the bitter end. Like we didn't have to break down tents and things like that, but I had to break down my own bus, like my own tent, and put things on my bus to go back to Brooklyn, because I do a bus for my yarn shop that goes up to the different festivals. And so we went to dinner. I took them all to dinner at the restaurant on the property, and we sat down and had a really good meal that night. And then I went back to my room and went to sleep, literally slept. And then, got up the next morning. There was a loadout that was taking place. But again, the production team was there to do that. I didn't have to be there. But that's not how I do things. So I'm like walking around, like there were things that were kind of left, like, okay, we need to decide what's going to happen with this, calling people to make sure they had what they needed from the space if something was left. So we tied it all up with a bow. I think everything was finished by 2 o'clock. on Saturday. By that time I had gotten dressed and was headed to Rhinebeck. And I went to Rhinebeck late in the afternoon that day on Saturday.
That was like the craziest time at Rhinebeck.
It was, but it wasn't, had calmed down by the time I got there. Like it wasn't in the main crazy of the day. So I slept in late, as late as I could. And I have a house up in upstate New York. So I went by there and kind of like changed my clothes and things like that. And then went and yeah, we got pictures. I saw some people who I didn't see who had been at Will and Folk, but I may not have seen in person. So I caught up with them at Rhinebeck. And Sunday I had brunch and relaxed. I did not go back to Rhinebeck on Sunday. So I just rested the rest of the weekend.
Were there anybody that you've met that you haven't met before in person? Like, have you met anybody for the first time that really made an impression?
Let me think. I'm sure there had to be. Vendors, definitely. There were people who I do business with, but never have met in person who were there. Some of us went to dinner that Thursday night, that Wednesday or Thursday night before load in, which was fun. And it's interesting. Like I said, like people, like we're on social media. I'm on social media and people see me often. And some people are like, oh, I don't want to bother. I don't want to say anything. So they can be kind of like a little starstruck. And then when they meet me, I'm like, please, like, we're all in this together. Like, what do you need? Let me help you get your stuff out your car, and they're like, you're just so down to earth, which I'm like, do I come off as not being do I come off as like, I don't pick up my own boxes? Cause I do, like, I love my own car and stuff like that. But it was those types of experiences. And even people who were just attending, like, kind of came up to Catherine and I, and this was like, this is really great. It makes me feel really good. So those types of things. But most of the vendors, I would say, I may not have met them in person, but because of the Zoom meetings we had before, I was familiar with them. So they didn't feel like they were brand new people. I had met them virtually. So.
Right. Did you have a celebrity moment when you met somebody and you were like, oh my God, I can't believe I met you?
Well, it's funny because I kind of did that with all the podcast people, with the exception of Gigi, who's a friend. But the rest of those podcasters I'd never met before. So it was really like, it was like great how we all kind of fanboyed all over each other. That was fun. And just created a great dynamic.
Did you buy anything?
Of course I bought stuff. I bought stuff. I bought something at a place that was like a vintage place. Like they like have things that they've collected. And there was this felted blanket, hunter green with purple stripe through. I bought that. And then I bought some stuff from Lamb and Kid, which I love, Sarah. They have beautiful stuff. So I bought some yarn from them. And a couple project bags, which like, here's a little one here. Like I have bought a couple ones like that. I try not to buy too much yarn because, I have access to yarn, but I like the other stuff. Like I like the bags and the needles and the, stitch markers and things like that. So I bought that stuff.
The first time I went to Rhinebeck, I was new to knitting. I didn't really know anybody. So it was all about just like sort of observing, seeing people, like looking at the yarn and taking classes and things like that. And this year I think I bought like one skein of yarn at Rhinebeck because I was so busy meeting people, talking to people. Like it was a social event for me. How do you treat Wool and Folk? Like, is that the business place for you? Is that the place where you come to make connections? Or is it also a social playground for you?
It's both. I think it's both. It's both and for me. Like, obviously it's a business because the event itself is a business. It is a business venture. We're all there to make money, to make a profit. But it's as much, I would say it is equally as much a social event as it is anything else, particularly the day of, like the planning part of it. I feel like you can look at it two ways, like the planning the whole year leading up to the event, like all the planning and the thought process and like, okay, what would this look like? And how do we want people to interact with this and all this other stuff? That is the business aspect in creating an event, any type of event. But for us specifically, creating Wool and Folk, right? Like we want people to leave having had a good experience. And the financial effort that we put into it, not only selling tickets, but also getting sponsors to buy into our event, to have their names associated with it. It is, we will advertise you every time you see Will and Folk, people are going to see your name associated with that. And you want to create an event that is going to make those sponsors proud of the fact that they affiliated themselves with you and want to come back and be affiliated with you again. And I think pretty much everybody felt like that, you know, like I speak to everybody. We get pictures of everybody. You know, I check on them throughout the day. Are you good? Do you have everything you need? Like everybody should feel, particularly sponsors, but everybody should feel like they're special and that they're not just an afterthought. And I think that it's that personal touch, that hospitality, that kind of sets Wool and Folk apart from the other types of things.
So when is it the preparation for it's going to start? Did it start already?
I've already started. Yeah. We had people 2 days before Will and Folk already saying, when does the applications come out for 2023? So it's already started.
Did you imagine that it's going to grow that big?
No, I mean, you hope. And like, I'm a, big thinker. So I'm like, of course it's going to be huge. I didn't think it was going to grow that big that fast. Like, this is literally our second year and it literally quadrupled in size.
So do you think like Wool and Folk is going to become a thing of the like few times a year in different places? Like, do you think
it could? That was definitely something that we think about. I'm sorry, it's so loud. That's definitely something that I've thought about. And they won't all be of that size. Like there'll be other, Wool and Folk, something different, like Vogue Knitting Live is going to be in New York City in February. I live in New York City. It would be kind of make sense to have like a little something that's a Wool and Folk something, give people a little taste of what it's like for Wool and Folk, but in the winter inside someplace, and other places like other cities and states. I've had more than one person approach me about like, please come here and do something like that. So you never know.
When you think about this year, like, did it meet your expectations?
Far exceeded my expectations. Like I'm not keep my expectations low. Like I keep my expectations low for other people because I have no control over other people. Like for myself, I put different boundaries and different expectations on myself, like goals. Like this is important for us to achieve X. And I feel like I achieve those things. Or at least I strive hard to achieve those things. But everything else, I always say to people, I'm like, look, we can make all the plans that we want, but whatever's going to happen is going to happen, right? And the reality is that those almost 3,000 people that showed up that day, if we didn't have the right tablecloth that we had been planning for 12 months, not there, they would have no idea. Like, and still be just as happy, sitting at the hay bales, eating off their laps. They could care less about the tablecloth. So like, it's important not to get so caught up in those little tiny minutia type things that we think is going to make or break the event, because people don't even miss it. They don't even know what the tablecloths were. They just know the whole thing felt cool. Like it felt nice and people were happy. And there was so much for me to take in. I didn't feel rushed. I felt like I didn't get to see it all and I can't wait to do it again. Or I got to touch a little bit of everything and I can't wait to see it next year. Like that for me marks success.
Well, thank you so very much for sharing your process and the whole preparation and all the work that went into that.
Thank you for asking me, Irina. I really appreciate it.
I hope to see you in Vogue Knitting or Wool and Folk in New York City.
Absolutely. I hope so too. Absolutely.